Saturday night. You know what that means. To our faithful few viewers, we're back again with another iteration of our Leadership Roundtable. And it's our leadership team, and we're just hanging out, having conversation, discussing different topics. And this week we'll be talking about finding your voice. But before that, we have been doing online content, I think for like about a month, or at least it feels like a month, especially this week. Guys, what do you feel like has been your highlight of this week, of all the online content we had?
Ooh. Mine was specifically Andy Un. I'm going to say first.
Shout out Andy.
Andy Un, before everyone else says it. Hopefully we'll be able to get that on, as a podcast or YouTube. Because I feel like that was so deep. It was so good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Andy and also, but then just for the sake of, the other ones that we did, I think the highlight was actually the start of the Bible reading. Because I think it's really simple when we were talking about it, but then I feel like the impact is a lot larger than expected. And I think even for me personally, I was like, it just like hit me differently than I thought it would. So
yeah, for me, Andy N was probably the biggest highlight, but since Danny already said that, I actually really like the content with Danny and Kevin, where we're talking about the difference between sacred and secular and how there shouldn't be a divide, and just how we're meant to influence culture, pray for celebrities, stuff like that.
Wow. Was that this week?
That was Monday.
That was Monday, but it seems like 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, time's flying. I personally liked my counseling session with Josh, just to say a different answer. But if I were to pick, I really like the Bible reading that we're doing as well. And I feel like it's special, and we're just helping people get into the Word. So you guys can follow us on Instagram and join us in that journey. And if any of these, content has been encouraging, please share it, pass it along. And so this is week 4 of us doing Leadership Roundtable. I guess by now the name has stuck, and will stick.
Yeah, it's here to stay.
Yeah, it's here to stay. How many weeks of quarantine is it? I feel like I ask literally every time we do this too. Like 2 months?
I think it's 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think we always say 7.
Yeah.
I think we said 7 for the past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So week number something that rounds to 10. That's where we're at. What is the food that you guys have missed the most during this quarantine?
Korean barbecue.
I'll go first.
Sorry.
Korean barbecue. Korean barbecue. Why Korean barbecue?
I just miss, I guess, like the quality and the ability to like have it right in front of you, cook it and eat it, versus like going to the frying pan back and forth, and then having all the side dishes. So I just really miss like that whole experience of Korean barbecue. Actually, I think it's the first meal I'm gonna eat, when everything else opens up. So
nice. I'm glad, Danny, you and I went to the Korean barbecue in Queens that one time, literally before everything shut down.
Like a week before, right?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Praise God. So both of you guys are Korean barbecue?
No. For me, I'm gonna be bougie. I miss sushi omakase right now. I miss some Japanese red snapper with some sea salt on it.
Yeah, shout out your boy, man. Maybe they'll watch and give you a discount.
Shout out to Mr. Nagai at Yamagata. I hope you guys are doing well during this pandemic, and I hope to visit you guys soon once this pandemic ends.
Irashaimase.
How about for you, Danny? What are you missing the most right now?
That's a great question. I actually think I might have to go with kimchi jjigae.
You haven't eaten that at home?
No, I have, but I want to eat it at a restaurant. I had it at home, but it's one of those things where you want to just go out just for the sake of going out. But yeah, but on a side note, you know what I thought about PCM when you mentioned Korean barbecue, like a week before we got quarantined.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's where I got sick from. Because like literally like 2 days after, when the pandemic broke loose. Because literally like 2 days after was when I started to get sick. But anyway, side note. What about you, PCM?
I'm not sure if that's where you got sick to answer that question. And for some reason, I'm not sure if I felt this way before, but today I really wanted to eat fried chicken.
Like Korean fried chicken or like
Popeyes?
Okay.
Like Gus's.
Popeyes.
Gus's.
Oh, like okay.
Shout out to Gus's.
Please. Wish them well.
I wish all your chain locations throughout the U.S. is doing well, and I hope one day you come to New York and New Jersey.
Amen.
We love you. But
Danny,
what up, man?
I got a question for you. Do you put samgyeopsal or spam in your kimchi jjigae? Which one's your preference?
Samgyeopsal, man. So the ratio, normally the ratio is like a third samgyeopsal to a whole kimchi, but you got to make it 1-to-1. It's the only way it tastes good.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
Danny has a pretty elaborate recipe that he told me one time.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. He told me that a noob move is to not fry the kimchi beforehand.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you gotta fry the samgyeopsal, make it all the fat come out. Then with that fat, you gotta fry the kimchi, and then you throw everything together. Oh man,
that sounds so good.
Maybe we should do a mukbang edition of
next week.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, that's how we'll get maybe 3 more viewers.
Yes.
But I had a fun icebreaker question for us to answer before we get into the topic of finding your voice. I told Josh I was going to ask him this when we went on, but it just didn't feel right then. So I feel like it might be good for us now. But which of the two is more annoying? A person who's stuck in the past or a person who starts acting brand new? People who are watching and will watch, leave it in the comments. Which is more annoying? A person who's stuck in the past or a person who acts brand new? Tell us in the comments and tell us why that person is more annoying. Because both are pretty annoying.
Yeah, they are.
Trying to think. All right, anyone have an answer? Josh.
Yeah, I honestly agree that both are pretty annoying. But I think nowadays with social media and stuff like that, I think what annoys me the most is when people try to start brand new. And I think it annoys me, especially when I see it on Instagram, where they make either a whole new account, they erase old photos, or they try to give off this new image that they're trying to go for. And I think like that's like, I don't know, that just annoys a lot out of me.
Yeah.
You guys know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm on board with Josh too. I think brand new is more annoying. I mean, they're both very annoying. And I wish I could have said the person that's stuck in the past, because I feel like if I say brand new, I'm going to sound like a hater. But I guess that's just what I am. But I feel like, if someone's acting brand new, I think my thoughts are like, hey, like I knew you literally yesterday and you weren't like this way. And I think it's more annoying, even though maybe it's like a good change and it's like, I'm just like being a hater, but I feel like that is more annoying.
For me, I would go with brand new too. So don't act brand new around us, guys. I'm just kidding. But for me, I think it's brand new because I feel like when you act brand new, I mean, you could be new, but I think it's like acting brand new. That's like the annoying part. And I feel like it's rooted in pride. I think that's why it's annoying to me. I mean, we're not thinking of anyone. I wasn't thinking of anyone. That's not why I came up with this question. But I just thought it would be like a fun question after we attended Josh's TED Talk last week. How to offend someone and mean it. I'm not thinking of anyone in either thing.
Hey, get ready for our new blog post coming out. That's tough. I would say someone who acts brand new confuses me more than it bothers me. But I think the more annoying one for me personally is the one who's always stuck in the past. I can't seem to get out of it. But at the same time, I think it's just a personality wiring because I like to think ahead, but sometimes I have a hard time listening to people who are always talking about the past. Yeah.
That's why Danny likes Kobe more than Jordan.
Kobe.
Yeah. But yeah, that was just a fun icebreaker where we get to be real. Maybe too real. But yeah, I mean, this week, what were some of the topics we talked about the last couple of weeks? Overcoming fear, insecurity. And this week we wanted to kind of go a different direction in a way, but I feel like it all kind of goes back to the same thing for us. But the whole concept of finding your voice, I would kind of equate that to becoming your true self, finding your authenticity and who you are and stuff like that. So finding your voice. And I kind of want to frame it with this to begin our conversation. It's the story that's found in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And it's the famous chapter of David versus Goliath. And, most of anyone who's gone to church or Sunday school knows the story. But basically, David is about to go fight Goliath. And as they're preparing him for that battle, they put on the king's armor on David. But what David realizes is that it doesn't fit him, that it's too big for him. It's not made for him. And so instead, he goes to what he has perfected or practiced, which is the stone and the sling, and the rest is history. But I kind of think about that story when it comes to finding your own voice. So what do you guys think about finding your own voice? What comes to mind for you guys?
I mean, I think like the two words that pop up in my head automatically is one that you already mentioned, authenticity. I think that's like just another word or phrase that comes to mind. And I guess another one is originality. And I guess those are similar. But just understanding that you're your own person, you're different from other people. There's something that only you can carry. I would say those two words wrapped up like that.
Yeah. I mean, for everyone who's tuning in live, if you have any questions in regards to this topic or anything we're talking about, please feel free to leave questions in the comments. But we'll just continue talking about finding your voice. So what about the rest of you guys? What comes to mind when you think of that story or finding your voice or just that whole framework of thinking?
Yeah. Do you have something, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. I feel like it's just really simply being yourself. And I think it kind of goes back to, what we were talking about with insecurity. But I feel like someone that is able to find their voice has security within themselves. And I think that way they're not trying to be anyone else, but they're secure in who they are. And I think that's the route that, takes you to actually finding and discovering, who God made you to be, what kind of voice he put inside of you. And I think in terms of the story that you just shared as well, I mean, it's a little bit dramatic, but I just want to throw it out there. But I feel like when you don't find your voice, you can die. As in like, let's say that David actually went out there with Saul's armor. He would have had no chance, and he wouldn't have slain Goliath because he wouldn't have been able to move because it was too heavy or it didn't fit him. So I feel like he could have literally died trying to fit in someone else's armor. And so I feel like him being himself was exactly what he had to do to not just survive and live, but to actually thrive.
Wow.
That's good.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I think what I think about when I hear that story or when you share that story is I realized that not every opportunity is a God opportunity. I'm realizing that not everything that looks good on the external signifies authority, power. It signifies what God wants that person to do. Because I think in any situation, any moment, especially in that culture, if you're invited to wear the king's armor, it's like one of the highest positions. It's one of the highest honors. You know, it represents a status of wealth, authority, and power. But I'm just realizing, like, not every opportunity that comes your way is a God-given opportunity, you know? And I think that's part of also finding your voice. I think sometimes we mistaken finding your voice for the platform, especially for, like, if you're young like me, we mistaken it for, like, platform, we mistaken it for applause, we mistaken it for whatever, the stage, the spotlight. But I'm realizing that's not it. And so I think there's something deeper than that too, which is something that, you know, I was thinking about when you were sharing that story.
Yeah, no, that's good. Because I think when it comes to finding your voice, you know, for tonight too, my goal wasn't necessarily to give steps on how to find your voice, but more about the process of finding it. Because I feel like that's the tension we have as believers, as children of God in the kingdom, where it's a tension that we're coming to learn that we do have a voice, but then also not in a rush to voice out. And I feel like that's kind of the tension maybe a lot of us are in, especially younger leaders. I feel like most of the people that would eventually watch this is learning that they do have a voice, but yet, like Danny said, not rushing for an opportunity to do it. So, you know, obviously right now, like with people we know, it's like for Asian Americans, for example, it's like, oh, it's time for the Asian American voice and all these different things, which is great. You know, we're all for that. But then there's another side where it's waiting for that right opportunity as well. What are some of the tensions you guys have felt? Because everyone, you know, talking and at this roundtable are young leaders, and I feel like we're all in that place ourselves.
Yeah, so I think for me, the tension, and I think our culture has a lot to play in it, you know, especially because of social media, and it's been such a big part of my story. But I think the tension is when you feel like you have to, what's the word? Like announce your voice. I don't know if that makes sense. Where you feel like you have to personally make your voice heard. And I feel like that's a tension because I don't think that's what God desires. And as a matter of fact, like you said, I think there's a timing, there's a pace, there's a process, there's a journey, and eventually it's God that, you know, allows that person's voice to be released. And, you know, when it does, it has more authority, more anointing, all that. But I think because of Instagram, where everything is easily accessible to launch your own voice or to make your own voice heard, I think the tension is, okay, how do I know this is selfish ambition versus how do I know this is God? You know, how do I know this is me trying to get my voice out there versus how do I know this is God now saying, son, it's time for your voice to be heard? So that's the tension I personally feel.
Yeah, I just want to jump off what Danny's saying, but I think even in like just in our society today, I think because information is so accessible, it's so easy to find leaders that are doing really well, or like even young leaders around our age that are like doing amazing things. And I think for me, the tension that I felt is a lot of comparison, actually, just like comparing where I am right now, what I know about myself, and then seeing the other people either around my age or a little bit older or even some younger, and feeling like, oh wow, like they know themselves so much more, or they're doing so much better than I am. And I think for me, it's just the tension of understanding the pace that God set for me. And then I think, you know, in ways for me to find my own voice without trying to emulate, you know, what the quote unquote successful people are doing as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of goes along with what Kevin shared about comparison. And I think the tension is always to rush ahead of God's process in forming and shaping your life and the values, the choices, and just who you are. And I think like one of the tensions I run into is like, let's just say example, like preaching, right? Like that's just the medium. That's when we say voice, it obviously means more than that. But like, let's say the medium of preaching, it's like, yeah, you can have a great sermon, and then you can rush ahead to think like, oh, I can preach every week, but you're at a point where it's not sustainable. Like you're not at that point of your life where like you can sustain preaching every week, because God, you can't rush God's process with you in that sense. I think like that's the tension that I feel when it comes to finding my own voice. It's like always trying to rush ahead of what God is doing in my life.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I think when you say that, it kind of makes me think about, let's say in the natural, we're straining to be heard, which means we're trying to speak louder, like that. You can't sustain your voice without it being strained. If you're trying to be louder than whatever voice is around you. And I feel like that's what I think about when you say something like that. It's even in the natural, that can't be sustained. Something Michael Todd says better than what any of us can. But in that story of David and Saul is the key part where David was sent for.
Yeah.
Like David wasn't trying to be like, give me an opportunity, but he even found himself in that place where he would get an opportunity. Like he wasn't trying to get it, but he was just serving. What would you say to someone from your own experiences of people who are trying to rush ahead? People who are trying to grab the microphone, let's say, whether it's a literal microphone or not. What are some of the things you would want to say based on your own experience?
Well, I think with people like that, first of all, I would affirm them, because I think in our culture, those quote unquote type of people we can easily look down upon, right? It's like, oh, look at them trying to get attention, or oh, look at them trying, but I think there's a part in which I think everyone probably feels like everyone has a desire to communicate, everyone has a desire to speak, everyone has a desire to influence. And so I think I would first affirm that person so that they're not, shamed. But then I would just remind them, like, it takes time to find your voice. And I would rather say something that's weighty and has value than something that's just very hollow. I think if you really want to speak, you can speak anytime. The things that you say can have impact, but it won't have as much impact if you allow God's timing and process and all that to take place.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase that comes to mind is whatever you build, you have to sustain, but then whatever God builds, God will sustain it. And I think it's exactly what Josh is saying. I think it's just the opportunity will come. I think God will, bring everyone to, a point in their lives where they can have some sort of influence. And I feel like it could look different for everyone. I don't think every single person is going to be called to, give messages on the pulpit exactly. But I think, you'll be a message to at least one person in your life, just living your life. And so even if it means just your family, I think those kinds of opportunities do come. But I think it is in God's timing, and it's just about letting God build versus you trying to build it yourself and then having to sustain it. So
for sure.
Sorry, I kind of froze out because my Wi-Fi is a little unstable. Sorry about that, y'all. But I think when I kind of hear that question, like, what would you suggest to someone, who's grabbing for the mic, who wants the spotlight at such a young age? I think because of our culture today, once again, I'm just bringing it back to American culture. We find it very appealing, very sexy, if I can say that. If you're part of a church, if you're spiritual, if you're religious, it's incredibly spiritual. It's really cool. And I think that's a part of the reason why it's so dangerous, I would say, because we made something look so incredibly cool, but it's very short-lived. And so just from my experience and love for that person, I would just remind them, every single individual that God chose to use mightily had to go through a period where they were unseen, had to go through a period of waiting. We like to call it hiddenness based off of that book, Anonymous. But they all had to go through a period where they were hidden, because it was in that period that God was literally able to do a deep work. God was able to build character so that when their time came, the character can sustain what God was trying to build.
Yeah.
And not allow what they were trying to build to destroy their character, And so I mean, we love reading about Christian history, and that's why there's so many moments where God would move so powerfully through individuals, but we would hear about their moral failure. You know, not trying to call anything out, but it's such a sad story. We would hear about their moral failure. We would hear about their lives outside of the pulpit, the platform where they were living a double life, and ultimately it literally destroyed them. You know, and so when I think about that, I'm realizing it's because they never embraced that period where God was developing them.
Yeah, and I would say with that, the other side of voice is living content in silence, right? Like,
wow.
you don't have to always have something to say. You
That's
don't
good.
always have to rush to, you know, bring something to the table. But I think there's a part where we just have to learn to be okay. There's that word, like King James Version word of long suffering, one of the fruits of the Spirit. And I think about Jesus when he has all the potential in the world, and yet we don't hear from him for 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like Danny was saying. And I think what we've been saying, like everyone's been highlighting, is just that whole process, because, I think everyone's in a rush to become a voice, but yet they don't have much to say.
Wow.
And, I think we've quoted in past YouTube roundtables before, but that book by E.M. Bounds, where he talks about how it takes 20 years to make a sermon because it takes God 20 years to make the preacher.
Yeah.
And just that whole process. But along with that, though, is the fun, I guess, of learning how to find your voice too. Or like when you discover, oh, shoot, I do have something to say, because I think that's part of that journey as well. What are some stories you guys have of where you first were like, oh, shoot, this is affirming the voice I do have? You guys have any stories like that?
Yeah, I mean, I could start off, but I think the first time I ever preached, I know we're not talking about exactly just voice as in preaching, but for me, I feel like I found so much affirmation there because, for one, I'm not in seminary. I haven't learned, like biblical teaching, like through, a professional, environment or anything like that. But I think for me, it's just revelations that God gave me that I would just jot it down on my phone every now and then, or create a Google Doc, like write some stuff down. And then when, PCM gave me the opportunity to preach, I think it was like 3 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago, like 2 years ago.
3 years ago, I think.
Yeah, 3 years ago. For one, I was super nervous just because I've never preached before. But then, after I preached, people were saying that like it actually affected them. Like the revelations that God gave me, they were, one, biblical, and then two, like it was things that actually they were going through. And then some people were like, I felt like this message was exactly for me.
Wow.
And I remember another pastor was like, hey, it doesn't seem like it's his first time preaching, like things like that. And I think to this day, it's still like probably the best sermon that I've preached, which is kind of sad. but then I think that's another part about just finding your voice, like the journey of like the ups and downs. But I think that was like a moment where I was like, oh shoot, like, God gave me a voice, especially in, this topic or this sermon that I preached, and he used me to be able to speak, to people, to bless people.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that day pretty clearly. We actually had like a lot of pastors come that day. A lot of pastors don't normally come because they're busy praying but for their Sunday service. But for some reason, we had like mad pastors come that one particular one. And a lot of them didn't know that Kevin's never preached before. And they were like so shocked and impressed. So I still remember that.
No, same. That Joseph message.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's still a lot of people who think Kevin's in ministry, like is in vocational ministry because he's on our team, and then I think they always get shocked when they find out that he works for the MBA.
Yeah, I think it's awesome because Kevin, like maybe you want to talk about this, and you don't have to, but like you even getting invited as a guest speaker to a retreat and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then they loved it. They wanted you even more because you weren't a pastor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, so I had the honor to preach at a retreat. It was like one of the summers, I think it was last year, or maybe it was fall, but it's just kind of crazy because when, the pastor reached out to me. He was someone that I went to school with at Rutgers. And then I was like, are you sure you have like the right Kevin? And then he was like, yeah, like I'm trying to invite you. And then I was like, how many people did you go to before you invited me? And he was like, dude, you're the first person on the list. And I was like, what? Like, for real? Why? And then they were just expressing like, you know, for their congregation, they just wanted to be able to show like, you don't have to be a pastor to be able to live out your faith.
Come on.
And I think even that itself, you know, it's a voice that I feel like God gave me, even if it's in the season, you know, maybe I go into ministry later in life, but at least in this season, I feel like God's giving me the voice to be able to spur on people that are just lay people, you know, at church, just in the body that don't have positions like in church or in seminary or anything like that, but to be able to live out, you know, like the word and to be able to even preach at like a retreat and things like that. So.
No, that's good.
Wow.
I mean, I just want to say this to whoever's watching and will watch. It's like, man, you don't need a calling, you know, like the calling to live your life on mission, you know. You don't need a calling to be a disciple. And I think that's just the reality of who God is and who we're called to be. So
good. Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah, what about what about you, Danny? What's a story you have where there's like a moment where you were figuring out like, oh my gosh, I do have a voice?
Yeah. Like trying to think of a story too, but I would say this. I'll share
story.
2008. Let me bring it back. 2008. I think this story is more of when I realized that my voice was different or my voice was unique. I would love to gear towards that because that's the only story I could think of. But I remember because I am in ministry, that's something I want to do. I remember growing up, and that's when I was studying that in college. I always thought the route would be, okay, Danny, eventually you graduate and then you'll be a youth pastor, college pastor, and then eventually you'll be a senior pastor, a very pastoral position in a church. Like, I got nothing against that. I love pastors and I love pastoral pastors and people. But I realized that for me, it just never connected. I don't know how else to just say this, but like my heart wasn't stirred for that. That wasn't what I was passionate about. And I remember I always beat myself up because I'm like, okay, then that means I can't do ministry. That means I got to do business and marketing or something else, right? And then little did I realize that, oh no, I can still do ministry, but it might look different. The voice that I'm realizing I have is a voice where I love to talk to people outside of the church. I love to talk to strangers. I love to talk to restaurant servers. I love to talk to, if they are in the church, I love to talk to them about getting out the church, And so I think for a long time, I wasn't able to say, okay, that is my voice. I never thought that I had the right to say, okay, this is what I want my voice to be, or this is the voice that God has given me. But it's something that I discovered maybe about 2-3 years ago, And so I think that was definitely monumental for me.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, for me, I think when it comes to like actual voice, I think the first time I remember it was when I was opening up worship for New Mercy when I was interning there, and that was like the first time I wasn't doing youth or whatever, and I was in front of like an adult congregation. And for me, I think there was a natural fear that I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't youth group. Like I can't just say anything, or like, it's with adults. Like you guys know what I mean, right? But then I forgot even what I just shared, but I just shared something that was on my heart and when I felt like I was preaching, like telling me to speak out. And afterwards, like, people came up to me and they'd be like, hey, like when you spoke, like the atmosphere shifted or like that really resonated. And that's when I realized like, oh, like my voice does have influence. Like there's something that my voice carries that makes an impact or influences and stuff like that. And yeah, not only just like in a preaching context, but I would say even in like, I remember one time in youth group, when we went out to New Orleans, a mission trip after Hurricane Katrina and just helping with the relief. And I think we were just having a really bad day and everyone was like really just in a bad mood, discouraged, whatever. And at that time, I just felt like I needed to speak up and just remind people of the mission of why we're here, of how important hope is. And even in that, like the team dynamic shifts, right? And I think, and that's when I also realized, like, oh shoot, that's something that my voice carries, like to bring leadership, to bring hope, to look at things in a different perspective. And so, yeah, I think that's when I started realizing, okay, there's something there.
Yeah, no, that's good.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think everyone's voice, I would say this is like their fingerprint. Like there are no two voices that are alike. Yeah. And I normally say this when it comes to like creativity, like, people can do the same cover of the same song, but it's gonna be different because of who's singing it. And I kind of think about that too. So I know for me, like the voice, obviously is preaching or speaking, but I think even in my leadership style, I think a lot of times there's pressure to be like certain leaders, or what I read in books, or, what we talked about, like comparison. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm learning to be comfortable in my own leading voice, if that makes sense. Because I'm not saying this to like boast. I really don't know anyone that leads like me. It's just a unique voice, I feel like. But I think all of that too, I think is, preparation. One of the quotes I was reading this afternoon is this Vineyard worship pastor, songwriter. He says, practice to the point where when the Holy Spirit comes on you, like you won't miss it. And I think if we go back to the original story of David, I think he was confident enough in knowing his voice where he could not wear the king's armor, because he knows what he's invested into up until that point. Right? It's not like, oh, this doesn't fit me, let me just go do my own thing. He's like, no, let me go to the thing I have actually honed and used, where he says, hey, I've defeated bears and lions, and if I could take him out, I could take out this giant, because it's the same God that's within me. So what do you guys think about that? Because I think one of the things we've been talking about so far tonight too is it's not our job to go after opportunities, but if we do our job of preparation, I think opportunities will come after us.
Yes.
Right? Like if we prepare. So what are some of the thoughts that come to mind when it comes to preparation for you guys?
I think for me, it comes down to self-awareness. Because I think you got to know who you are for your voice to have an impact that it's meant to impact.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think like a lot of times, I think for people who are starting to figure out their voice or whatever, I think the temptation there is to project something that you're not, right? And I think we've all struggled with this. Like to be honest, I think initially when I first started like preaching or teaching or whatever, like I want to be like Danny. Like I want to be enthusiastic. I want to be like, like fiery. And that's the projection that I have. But I realized that as I'm finding out my voice more and more in the process, like, no, that's actually not how my voice is actually meant to be. It's not effective that way. And so I think it's a lot of it just like knowing who you are, knowing how God designed you, knowing your personality, your wiring, all those little things help you so that like, I think that those are preparation things. So when the opportunity does come, it's like you're kind of just smoothly putting on a glove. I just got this random idea in my head. It's like you're just smoothly putting on a glove and it just fits. Yeah. Well, I don't know why I thought of that illustration. I don't know why a glove. But you guys know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
That's so good. I mean, I love that answer. I love that answer. I want to second that answer. I wish I could just repeat the answer because it's so good.
Do
it. Just to maybe give a different answer too. I would say part of the preparation period is actually finding a voice. Let me rephrase it. Finding a mentor that can help you find your voice. Finding a mentor figure that won't make you imitate them because they want to make copies of themselves, but that will actually help you discover your voice along the way. I think that's so crucial. I think that's so important. Now, we can all testify in this team. PCM has played a major, huge role in helping us find our voice. Number one is because he never tried to make us like him. And I think there's just so much humility in that, because I think a lot of times like mentors want to make people like them because they want to make copies of themselves. But one thing PCM did really well
that
was
would hurt the world.
Maybe. But I think one thing PCM did really well was he allowed us to discover our voice, for ourselves. He would help us along the way. He would coach us. He'd sometimes point us towards a different direction if we weren't in the avenue of our voice. And so I would say that's one thing that I would highly, highly recommend for preparation. Because if you think about it, what did David have?
Samuel.
Kind of, right? He had Samuel. Yeah. I don't know why, but I thought of Samuel, and I mistaken Samuel for David because Samuel had Eli. But yeah, let's just use that example because Samuel had Eli.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like what Danny. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Kevin.
No, go for it.
I like what Danny shared too, and I think that's really practical because I would say every one of us, when it comes to the medium of preaching and our voice coming out through preaching, it's not like we started off fresh, brand new, like a fresh brand template, right? Like there was a preacher that we look up to, there's a preacher that we admire, and we don't imitate them or we don't mimic them. Well, initially we might, but it's like that's kind of like the framework that we start off with, and then we emulate, and then we kind of twist it and make it our own, and eventually we step into our voice. I would say that's like very practical, like not even with preaching, but like if there's someone that you admire, just their life message, like that's something that you can like use as a framework, and then you can step into your own being.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think just both of your answers combined is, I mean, I didn't even think about the mentor part, but I think that's so key, where you can find someone to learn from and be inspired by, but then that you don't become, so that you're not trying to become that person, but you take whatever that can help you, from that person. And I think on the term of like mentors too, I think a lot of us feel like there's just one mentor your entire life for every single thing in your life. But I feel like I'm learning that that's not entirely true. I think there might be someone that could father you your entire life, like as a father figure. But I think as a mentor, you can be mentored in different areas by different people. And I think it's kind of like what Josh was saying. You need the self-awareness to know what you even have to prepare like for. So I think to give like a quick story, I used to play bass for Praise Team, and I played since youth group, and then I played up until college. I played up until college, but then when I was like on the worship team, after a while, I realized like, man, like I'm pretty bad at bass, and like I can't play unless I have the chords in front of me. And then it's like what the phrase or the quote that you just said, like practice so much that when the Holy Spirit hits, you don't miss it. But for me, like let's say the Holy Spirit was taking the band to like another level and they're doing spontaneous stuff, there's no way that I would be able to follow along just because I'm not like musically talented enough. And I think because of that, for me, I had to understand that bass isn't something that I'm preparing for. But for me, like what actually draws me, what a desire that I actually have is for people. And I think in that, the way that I found my voice is like I just prepare on like how to connect with people, how to walk through things with people, so that when the Holy Spirit hits, when I have that opportunity, I'm already there and understand how I can walk with this person. So I think self-awareness is key, where you understand what you need to even prepare for.
Well, that's so good.
I mean, I think based on like what you guys are even saying right now, if I go back to even what we talked about earlier, where if every person's voice is unique to them, like their fingerprint, then everyone's voice is different. But I feel like DNA can be the same, right? Like twins will have the same DNA, but their fingerprints are still different. And I feel like even for our team, I think all of us have different voices, but our DNA is the same, like on how we move and operate. But I kind of want to go back to kind of the thing about mentors that you guys are talking about, because I feel like I'm about to say something that maybe isn't something the world trumpets and champions, because it kind of goes the opposite direction. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Like in the world, the quote is, "Don't be an echo, be a voice." Right? That's like what you'll find on inspiration blogs and Tumblrs, if they still exist. Like, don't be an echo, be a voice. But what I want to say is learn to be an echo first. Like, because I don't think, like we said earlier, a lot of people are in a rush to be a voice and yet they have nothing to offer. But I really feel like the part of learning how to become a voice is first learning how to be an echo. Where I know even for myself, when I first started preaching, you know, I was literally saying things I heard my own pastor say. You know, I was picking up things that I was listening to podcasts before podcast was a thing. You know, like I was saying things, repeating things, illustrations, the way to say things. Like I was just copying whoever was anointed and blessing me, and just sharing it. You know, and I really feel like that's kind of how you learn who you are and who you aren't. And what do you guys think about that phrase? You know, like the world says, "Don't be an echo, be a voice," but I honestly feel like wisdom is first learn how to be an echo. What comes to mind for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's I guess like to be able to respect and honor the previous generations and to build upon what's already there, than feeling like you have to bring something brand new. And so I feel like in that sense, like what Josh said earlier, that originality is something that comes up when you think about finding your voice. But I think maybe a lot of us may have the wrong view of originality. Because I think maybe people think originality is like something brand new, like inventing like a light bulb, right? But then maybe it's something like creating like smart bulbs, which is a twist on light bulb. And that's the originality that's there. And so I feel like by becoming an echo, and it's like what you guys said before, because you can say the same things, but because of who says it, it's different. And I think that's one of the ways that you learn to find your voice. And you know, sometimes you say things and you're like, oh, this doesn't make sense or apply to me. Like, because for me, like, let's say I'm not in seminary, but I'm preaching like as if like I'm saying stuff like about seminary, like that wouldn't make sense. But I think through trial and error, like that's something you learn. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that analogy, like the light bulb, and then smart bulb. Like that's really cool. I think that's a different definition of originality, and we think it always has to be new, but it's like, oh no, it can just be innovating something better, you know. So I love that. Yeah, PC, I think what you share, it kind of goes along with what we were all sharing beforehand, where I think there's just a lot of trial and error process. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's unwise to think that right off the bat you're gonna get it going and you're gonna hit a home run and you're gonna like hit that bomb sermon or that message or whatever thing that you're communicating. And I think rather it's like, just understanding that you're in process and there's people ahead of you, and it's okay to frame or model after them until you find out who you are. Because the reality is that I don't think anyone started off saying, hey, like, this is who I am, this is me, like I know who I am. Like I don't think there's anyone like that. I think everyone starts off with a framework from somewhere. So
for sure.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would definitely agree based off of what we were saying. And I think one thing I would love to add is I think sometimes one of the mistakes happen is if you're just echoing one person. And so one thing that I'm realizing more and more is that when you echo, to echo wide. So what I mean by that is don't just try to imitate one person for the rest of your life, because it becomes very, very narrow. Your thoughts, your view, your lifestyle becomes very incredibly narrow. However incredible that person you're echoing is, you know. But if you echo wide, if you echo more than one person, and this could relate in literally any sphere, business, whatever, right? You're always going to be following another person. You follow your manager, you hear from your boss, XYZ. And I think by doing so, what's going to happen is that your view, your lifestyle, your perspective is not only going to be super narrow, but it's going to be more wide, more broad. And that way you'll be able to, eventually when your voice comes, you'll be able to discover in a wide way. And so I think that's just something I'm realizing more. And Pastor John Tyson from Church of the City I think he's one of the first people that I heard that really suggested that, you know, for young leaders. And so When it comes to echoing, I would definitely highly recommend find multiple people to echo.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think of I think of a couple quotes when it comes to that, where, you know, like, I don't know who said it, but the highest form of flattery is imitation. Have you guys heard that before?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's part of it. There's another quote, I think supposedly like Picasso said it, but it's good artists copy, great artists steal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you guys heard that quote before?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like there's a process in that, because I think even for me, when it comes to like designing, like I never like learned anything about designing. I don't even know actually how to do it even now. But I literally started by just imitating what everyone else was doing. Like, I looked at what Nike was doing. I looked at what Food Church was doing. I looked at what Bethel was doing. I literally looked at what all these other conferences were doing, and I just tried to make my own version of what they were doing. And I feel like somewhere along the way, like, I developed my own voice in design, where I feel like people are like, oh, that's so Pursuit, you know, when they see a graphic or whatever. And I feel like that's kind of the process in anything. It's like, that's how you learn, right? Like we're all saying, you know, like Kobe did Jordan, because I see the Kobe jersey, right? Like, I think that's just kind of how you learn your own thing, you know. But yeah, I mean, I kind of want to go back to just the whole journey, though, of really allowing God to do the deeper work. I thought of, as I was thinking about this topic, I guess I thought of what Josh told me, and I'm gonna put Josh on the spot. But Josh, remember what you told me after our conference last September, after I preached at the last night? You know, I preached a message, and then Josh, you know, maybe you could just tell that story.
Yeah, well, I mean, to give a little bit of back clue, there was another preacher who spoke the night before. I think some of you guys who are watching might know him, Pastor Will Chung, and he's a fabulous speaker. Very, I don't know, how would you describe him, guys? Like, he's very polished, like
polished,
textbook
clean,
communicator, clean,
charismatic.
Like charismatic. Like he's like a textbook communicator preacher. And then P. Sam is closing out the last night, and for those of you guys who were there, it's like one of the best messages that I think our whole team could agree. Like, we were just wrecked. Yeah, afterwards, like, yeah, it was just like an amazing message. But you have to understand, like, P. Sam he's not quote unquote textbook. He's not quote unquote like, yeah, he's not quote unquote textbook, right? That's all I can say right now in comparison to Will Chung. But I told Pastor Sam afterwards, I was like, P. Sam, you can never preach like textbook, because your greatest strength is your vulnerability, your authenticity, and your relatability with people. That's what makes your messages so powerful, because people can connect with you on a spiritual, not only on a spiritual level, but on a human emotion level. And I think that's where your message comes through.
Yeah,
that's what I said, right?
Yeah, that too. But also, you know how, because
oh shoot, that's not what.
No, that's good. I feel really encouraged. But you know how we went to Michigan together, and then a lot of the stories I shared on the last night, I shared it in Michigan.
Yeah. And, oh yeah. Okay. So yeah. So a lot of the things that PCM shared. Oh man, I'm so sorry. That's what you were.
No, I like that story because I feel encouraged.
Yeah, that still kind of goes with what we're trying to talk about, right? Yeah. But yeah, in that last message, he was actually just re-going through the history of Pursuit and his journey. But I've heard this before, maybe about 4 years before that, in another retreat that he and I went to in Michigan. But when he spoke it at Pursuit Conference this past September, it was on another level. It was a lot deeper. It was a lot more authentic. It was just totally on a different level. And I went up to him and I was like, yo, I've heard that story maybe 2 or 3 times, but the way you just preached it right now, it's totally different. And it might be because, like, you know, the different things that you went through and stuff like that, processes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to go back to that because, you know, although the story is the same, I feel like what changed is my voice. Wow. You know what I mean? Because I think And then I think I might have said it to you after, Josh, after you said that to me. Maybe I shared it with the whole team too, where I felt like I could have never preached that message the way I did without having pursued Be 5 Years Old. Like it took 5 years for the same stories to actually become what it is, because I honestly feel like that's how our voice works in a lot of ways, you know? And it's just that whole, just process, you know? What are some thoughts that come to mind for you guys right now?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like even as we were sharing this, this leadership roundtable, I feel like there's still maybe people that listen in that are like, oh, yo, these guys, they found their voice, they're in their lane. But truth is, I'm gonna be very honest, like I'm still finding my voice. I'm still discovering my voice, right? And of course there's pressure, especially because there's that need, like, oh man, I gotta find it. What am I gonna do? But I love stories like this because it is a process. Like we are journeying, we are learning. And truth be told, I heard this one phrase, this one quote, and this person the context of it was regarding, you don't know what you want to do. Like you don't know what you were created to do until you hit 50. So when you're in your 20s, you think you know what you want to do, but you don't. When you're in your 30s, you're slowly realizing that you don't know anything. When you're in your 40s, you're now realizing what it is that you're passionate about. And then now in your 50s is when you discover your lane, your intersection. And in many ways, I feel like finding our voice is similar. Now, I'm not saying about the age groups and whatnot, but I think it takes a lot longer than people realize. And I think that's one of the struggles, is because we don't know when that finish line is. We don't know when we'll find our voice, But I think that's part of the process, where you have to be okay with saying, you know what, I don't know when I'll make it. I don't know when I'll reach it, but I'm okay with discovering it more and more every single day. I think that's the conclusion that I'm trying to come to too.
That's good.
Yeah, I think also like going along with process and how that adds to our voice, I think understanding the seasons that you go through in life is really crucial, because every season that you go through in life, it adds something to your character, it adds something to your personality, and then that in turn influences your voice when you speak. And so I think, like, just to understand your process, I think it's tempting to think like, oh man, like I can't wait to communicate, or I can't wait to preach, or I can't wait to speak, and not pay attention to what God's doing in the very moment, because whatever you're going through in that season can be the thing that takes your voice to the next level. So, because I'm pretty sure PCM for you too, right? Within that 5-year process, from the first time you went through Pursuit's history to that last time you spoke at a Pursue conference, like those 5 years, you probably went through so many different seasons that formed and shaped not only that message, but you, right? And that's ultimately why the message is different.
For sure. I mean, I think the whole journey for us has been costly and always coming back to that same yes that we said. But I think, because obviously the main thing that we go after as a ministry is revival. And I think Danny has said it in messages he's preached for us. Even this past year, when did you preach? February, was it? Right, go listen to that message where, revival is sexy, like, oh, we want to see God do amazing things. Like everyone knows prayer is important. Everyone knows like reading the word is important. Everyone wants to be close with Jesus. And I felt like what changed for me is like, letting my actions become my voice rather than me just rallying a cry, if that makes sense. And I felt like,
so good.
Obviously voice, we think of like literally what we're saying, but I think what changed was my lifestyle had to match what was coming out of my mouth.
That's so good.
Even though what I was saying was already true, like I now had the history and the authority to say, this is what I'm about, And I think that's kind of it. Like, I don't think we get there automatically. I think it's more like using what we have, like whatever voice you have right now, even if it's not the final, Charizard version or whatever, right? like just use what you have. And I feel like that's how you develop it, And God will put you in a situation where it's like, all right, let's see if you really meant it or not. You know, let's see if it was just a voice in talk, or is it a voice that you live out loud? So I feel like that was probably the main difference, where I think, you know, our heart hasn't changed, but I think just what went behind it, you know, to make it, you know, something we had authority in. So there's that. And I think there's a lot of different things, but I think that's what comes to mind first of what has changed between those like few years.
Yeah. I also like how you just used the word authority. I think when it comes to like our voice and our life speaking, because I think it's connected to authenticity, right? The more you become who you're meant to be, the more authority there is.
Yeah, for sure.
So I really like how you mentioned authority.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to say this: you are your most anointed self when you're your most authentic self.
Come on.
Right? Like, I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't really have much to add to, you know, what you guys are saying. I think I'm just reminded of that quote again that you shared in the beginning, how it takes 20 years to make a message because it takes God 20 years to make a preacher. So I think it's just about the process and the weight that comes with the process. So, you know, if I preached a message, the same process message, maybe like 10 years down the road, I'm sure there's so much more I could talk about than the first time I preached it. So
yeah. Amazing. Any other thoughts for you guys? Maybe we could go into some questions if there are any. I don't know if there are.
I can transition us into a question, I guess, and I guess it can be a thought also. But you know, I think social media has a big factor in finding our voice, right? And I think the reality with social media is that everyone has a platform. That's just the reality of social media. But I think people mistake, because I have a platform, I have a voice. I wanted to hear what your guys' thoughts on that.
Because I have a platform, I have a voice.
No, that's good. I mean, everyone has a follower, right? At least one, like on Instagram. So no, I really think that's the struggle of this time. Like, everyone wants to be Insta famous. Everyone wants something to go viral. I'm trying to think more though, but I really think that's the issue of the age, or one of them at least.
Hey, what was that quote you said in the beginning? Everyone has a voice, but not.
Who are you talking to?
You.
Me?
I thought you were, yeah. They're like, everyone has a voice, but not everyone needs to be heard.
No, that's the hater way to say it, I think.
What was the quote?
I forget. I think like everyone's in a rush to be a voice, but a lot of people don't have anything to say. Like everyone wants to be a voice, but not everyone has something to say. And you know, I think what we're trying to add to this whole topic is, because I think along with everyone wanting a platform, or everyone thinking they have a platform, I think everyone wants to be deep. But whether something that's deep is whether it's a ditch or a well is based on substance, you know?
Wow.
So, you know, I mean, I think about this a lot. Like Josh mentioned hollow, you know, things are very hollow in this world. Things are very shallow. And I think what makes the difference is substance. So
that's so good.
Yeah, I'm still trying to process that thought.
Yeah.
You know?
I actually have a question I would love to ask, because I would love to know your thoughts. This is more personal, but who have been some of your echoes, or who did you guys echo? Who are some people you guys echoed?
I don't know if I have anyone echoing me right now.
But from what I heard, you got a bunch. But who are some people that you have echoed? And it doesn't need to be quote unquote pastor or in the church.
For sure. I mean, I could start. I think for me, when I was starting out as well, obviously the first person is my mentor, my pastor, Pastor Daniel Park. I mean, I learned to preach by listening to him. Before I ever had an opportunity, I got the privilege to listen and to hear and to absorb and be impacted by his teaching, his words, his sermons, his his thing. You know, like if anyone has ever heard me preach, I like to interject like, you know, Koreans are good looking or I'm good looking or whatever to kind of change it up.
Oh, that's where you got it from.
Yeah, I not just say it because it's true, but because I picked it up, you know, because I know it works to like grab people's attention, to kind of keep them listening. So like little things like that where I remember one time when I was interning, I was like 20 years old or whatever at a church, and I was just giving an announcement. I wasn't even preaching, but everyone came up to me and was like, "Oh, I could see Pastor Daniel in you," and things like that. So obviously, my own mentors in my life, and I think when I was youth pastoring, you know, I was listening to Judah Smith like every week and just picking up his and the way he enunciates things, the way he tells stories, the way he projects his voice are things that I picked up because at that time he was before he was Justin Bieber's mentor, he was a youth pastor. So I was listening to him a lot, and that's where I was learning how to preach. I was like 20 years old, 19 years old, and I was listening to Judah Smith every week. And I was listening to him, and I think when it comes to thinking and my whole belief system of what's possible and impossible and what God is able to do was Bill Johnson. So I would say those people were the main influences or voices I was listening to that helped not only frame how I thought, but how I was going to be a voice. So along the way, you know, I picked up other voices and things and my own voice and learned what works for me, what doesn't. You know, I can't tell like Judah Smith's, you know, wedding story or like his story of being a dad, you know what I mean? So, but other things I was just literally, I remember at that time, like a 19-year-old youth pastor, I was just literally preaching his sermons, you know? So that was for me when I started out.
Dang. What about you guys?
Yeah, the voice that I echo is Pastor Sam. I think when I first heard Pastor Sam speak, I mean, I think his whole message about revival, bringing heaven onto earth, going after the supernatural and the impossible, I was like, oh wow, there's someone who actually believes like what the Bible actually says. And so I was like, okay, like my belief system was definitely influenced by that. Even just a lot of the speaking things, like if we're talking about just pure communication, like I grew up with people who are just 3-point preachers and whatever. But like the way PSM would be creative and would drop these one-liners, and I would be like, whoa, that's the first time I've ever seen that done. I also really like John Tyson. I personally like him just because like I think that man is just brilliant. I think he's first and foremost a theologian before he's a preacher or whatever. But the way he brings theology and also analyzes culture and our moment in history right now, like his cultural analysis is like on a different level. So I think he definitely brings the word in connection with our world today. And yeah, sometimes like I watch Kevin Hart and just to learn like, just to learn like pure communication skill wise, like in terms of like finding my voice like that, like learning how humor works. I think that's important as well. So
like timing, punchlines,
pace.
Pause.
Yeah,
it's true. What about you, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, I think to go off that, the person I would love to echo most is probably Dave Chappelle, because I think he's probably the greatest stand-up comedian. Obviously, I can't be talking about his content, you know, in the messages, but I think it's the way that he delivers it and keeps the audience engaged. I would love to speak that way. I just can't yet, but maybe soon.
Yeah.
But I think he's someone that I would love to just emulate and echo, like just communication wise. But I think, you know, Pastor Sam definitely for sure. I think even the people that have influenced him too, just because he's mentioned them to me, because he told me that, you know, Judah Smith was his favorite preacher. So for me, I was like, after hearing that, I was like, okay, I got to go listen to Judah Smith. So I listened to a lot of Judah Smith, a lot of Bill Johnson. And this is one person that I wish, I hope I don't pick up the way that he communicates, but it's Chris Valentin. Because I feel like he's the strongest communicator or the greatest preacher. But then I think for me, I get a lot of like content or ideals like from him. I think I've probably listened to every single message he's ever preached, just like that's on his podcast. Like I remember this one summer, I literally listened to it every single time I was in the car. And I think he was like my favorite preacher for a while. So I think he would be the person that I would echo the most, at least in that season. Yeah.
Wow.
How about you, Danny?
For me, I mean, I think we could all mutually say Pastor Sam, definitely, right?
For sure.
But,
yeah.
So my take's a little interesting because I don't think I've ever tried to echo his preaching. Not because it's something that I didn't want to echo, but I realized it's not me, and I realized that right away. But I did want to echo his skill as a preacher. So I remember there were like stories that I would write down, just change up the names, and I would share. Real talk. I'm just being honest. You know, I think in terms of kind of like what he preaches on, the story format of it, that's something that I did try to emulate too. But I realized that I think we're just very different in terms of style, and I think anyone else can testify. But Pastor Sam for sure. Pastor Will Chung has been a huge influence where I did want to echo a lot of his material, his content, his delivery. And so I would say in terms of like preacher, that's probably the person that I did try to echo the most. So he's someone, then we got to throw it back to some old school. David Wilkerson is someone that I really, really admired and learned a lot from. And then last but not least, Kobe. I echoed Kobe.
What? How?
Especially being the only Asian playing ball in middle school. I did the turnaround fadeaway.
Yeah, what was your nickname on the court? It wasn't hot sauce, right?
It was soy sauce. I didn't bring it up. It was Yao Ming, soy sauce, and then Jeremy Lin.
That's good company.
Yeah, you should have been. Man. You should have been Tenja.
Yo, they didn't know that back then. I mean, now I could do it. Now they call me gochujang, but back then you were either soy sauce or duck sauce. That's they call me soy sauce.
Samgyeopsal, because you make the three. But the three. But yeah, no, I think what's really cool about that is the fact that the things you guys picked up from me, what didn't originate with me, you know. And I think maybe one day we could do like something on like, you know, heritage or something, you know, spiritual inheritance and heritage. Is it like too deep and prophetic? I don't know, but yeah, maybe. But I think something like that.
So good.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Carol had a question. Who would you say has the most distinct voice in our generation? It could be secular or sacred. Who has the most distinct voice in our generation?
I think for me, if it's sacred, I actually think Michael Todd for our generation. I think he's the voice. I mean, just his story alone is like so inspiring. I felt like I was supposed to watch the Crazy Faith series again anyways. But Michael Todd, I think when it comes to a sacred voice, if you want to say that, I feel like it's Michael Todd and just what he brings to the table. But I think just the voice for the generation, for the last, I don't know, couple of decades, I honestly think it's Kanye. You know, maybe he's a sacred voice now too.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But I feel like Kanye has influenced culture more than anyone.
I agree for the sacred. I'm thinking about maybe someone outside the church.
I'm trying to think who else is like influencing people.
I do think it's an entertainer though.
Yeah, for sure.
Like an entertainer.
I mean, just find who has the most Instagram followers, and I think
like that,
I don't know.
I thought it was Selena.
Was it Selena?
Maybe not.
I'm gonna Google it right now.
I think it's Selena Gomez.
Kardashians.
Oh, Kardashians. Are they still relevant?
Cristiano.
Oh.
Oh.
I think he doesn't say much.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe your boy LeBron, P. Sam.
Nah, he's not on the list. He's not in top 10.
No, I mean
As a
like
voice.
most distinct voice.
Ariana Grande's 3. Or second. She's second. Oh, The Rock.
Oh.
Ah.
Yeah. But I think Kardashians have definitely influenced culture and you know what young girls try to be these days.
Yeah.
Any other cool fun names that come up?
Drake
for sure.
Drizzy.
Drake.
Hotline Bling.
Do the dance.
How does the dance go?
Kevin does. Kevin's a dancer. Guys, if you want Kevin to start a TikTok for dancing, leave a comment right now in the chat.
Do it.
Right, because Kevin's actually a dancer. But yeah, I think there's a lot of voices in culture. I just can't think of any. But those are the two main voices I think of.
Maybe in sports, the women's national team, soccer team.
I
think they're a huge voice right now in terms of like feminism and stuff.
Yeah, equal pay. It got denied supposedly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
that's a good point, Josh.
Yeah.
Because they shouldn't get equal pay. They should get paid more than the men's national team because they suck.
For the men's?
Yeah. Yo, next time I'll wear my Alex Morgan t-shirt.
Who's that?
Oh yeah, you finally got one. I thought you couldn't get one.
No, they had it in men's sizes. Maybe they saw my tweet, but I'll wear my Alex Morgan t-shirt next time.
Right. Yeah, should we all wear our jerseys next time?
Who's Alex Morgan?
She's the best player on that team.
Which one? The women's team?
Yeah.
She's having a baby soon.
Congrats, Alex.
Yeah, congrats, Alex. I'm your biggest fan. I love you, Alex. I have your jersey as a t-shirt.
Yo, we have one fun question come in. I don't know if we have time, but this person asked, what is some of your funniest or embarrassing stories while preaching?
Funniest story while preaching.
Yeah, on top of that, I got an honest question. This is me. Have you guys ever said something that you guys regret saying while preaching?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I can't think of anything, but
yeah, probably.
Have you ever said something heretical that you didn't realize in the moment, but afterwards you realize?
You're trying to set us up, Danny?
Are you trying to expose us? Yeah, who paid you off, bro?
All right, next question. Let's go back to the original one. All right, what are some of your funniest, embarrassing stories?
I got one.
Yeah.
I think this was when I first started preaching. I came back from Africa, and then I had this short-term gig at my home church. I needed someone to just come and preach for like 3 months. I remember one Sunday, it was like towards the closing. So I'm like wrapping up and I'm like building it up and I'm hyped. And I meant to say, God bless you. But for some reason, like, I forgot. There was another word in between there, but I said God's breast. And yeah. And then, but the thing is like, it slipped out. And then like, I couldn't even laugh about it because you just had to move on. Cause like just in the moment and everyone's like kind of snickering in the thing, but that was like one embarrassing moment for me.
Dang.
That's pretty funny.
I could imagine that off the top of my head. Come on, keep praying. God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you.
All right, see y'all next Sunday. Just leave after that.
I love it.
That's funny.
Embarrassing story?
I mean, I have one. It's not that embarrassing, but it's the only one because I've only preached like less than double digits. So. But I think it was like my second or third message, but it was towards the closing, and I asked the praise team to come up, to play, just like worshipful background track, like to get to like the deep parts. And I was like, oh, this is, me, I'm just gonna bring it home. And I asked the praise team to come up, and I'm like about to go into it, and then the praise team leader, he presses like one button really loud, and it's just like bing, and then it just like ruined like the vibe of everything, and then it just stopped the flow. I mean, it wasn't his fault. I feel like there was something with the equipment, but yeah,
maybe he's the real mole. Maybe he's the real mole.
Yeah.
I think of an embarrassing story. I would say this: my greatest fear is that my zipper is gonna be down while I'm about to preach. I think that's my like biggest fear. So I'm like, all right, everyone, let's close our eyes, and that's when I check. You know, because I feel like that's my fear. But thankfully, I don't think I've ever preached with my zipper down, or at least people were like too embarrassed for me and they didn't tell me. But
yeah, check it right now. Check it right now.
I'm wearing sweatpants that don't have a zipper. So
yo, if people were checking to see if your zipper was open, we need to pray for them.
Oh my God,
I'm just saying.
But that's my greatest fear, just in public speaking, if I'm honest. Yeah. But I think the funniest story, at one time I was preaching, this is like when I was youth pastoring, my contact came out.
Oh.
Like, because I think during worship I was getting wrecked. So I was like getting like, I was a mess. And I think like my contact fell out during that way, but then I can't like leave to go get new contacts or glasses. So I literally preached with like one eye like this, I think.
The entire time?
Yeah. Thankfully I wasn't a guest speaker, but it was my youth group, so
man.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think for me it's just an embarrassing story, but it was probably my first time preaching after YWAM. The first time I ever got invited to preach. And so it was like one of the very first times. And so I remember I was super nervous. It was a youth group, but I was so nervous. And I tried to memorize everything I was going to say. And I go there and I completely forgot what I was going to say. And it was one of those things where I didn't bring notes because we didn't believe in that in YWAM. Yeah, I completely forgot. I blanked out. And so I remember literally, I'm not making this up. I would say, hey guys, my name is Danny. I'm just so excited to be here. My name is Danny. I'm grateful to be here. My name is Danny. I think I said my name is Danny 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 different times. And I couldn't get the flow of it. I couldn't remember it. So I just went to scripture and just found the Bible passage or whatever it was. I just tried to share whatever I remembered. But I just remember it was so embarrassing. Because I think that's the moment where everyone zoned out. They're like, all right, who is this guy? He's weird. Oh, but yeah. So lesson learned. Bring notes.
Yeah, PCM, now that you mentioned your greatest fear about zipper opening, I have another funny story too. Kevin was there for this one. This was like when I was first started preaching too. And it was for Rutgers Korean Christian Fellowship Alumni Night. I was invited as an alumni to come back and guest preach. And 5 minutes in, I see like everyone just laughing. Everyone's just laughing. And I'm like, what is going on? And I try to first ignore it, but I can't because it's literally everyone's like turning to each other and whispering. They're like laughing. And I'm like, guys, and I said saying to the mic, I'm like, guys, what are you guys laughing about? Right? I'm like, is my zipper open? I said that into the mic and I checked out and I was like, guys, my zipper is closed. Why is everyone laughing? And then I found out later it was because I kept saying right after every sentence. You know, like when you first start off preaching, you need a filler word. And that's why everyone was laughing, because after every time I said it, they just couldn't stop. But I literally said it to the mic. I guess. I don't know.
They have no sense of humor. They have no sense of humor.
I felt so bad because it was like Josh's time preaching in front of, like classmates that he's like, mentored and kind of grew up with before. And then it's just like, everyone's like snickering. And then I'm like, oh, should I text them? Like, what do I do? Like, how do I help them?
Yeah. Should we do 1 week on honor then? Should we do 1 week on honor? Yeah.
Man, that's funny.
But thank you to people who asked questions. And our time is wrapping up. So we'll give the floor to Josh.
Hey guys, hope tonight's thing was really helpful. Just to recap, we were just talking about finding our voice. And just to recap, we're just talking about how, man, our life is meant to speak. Our life is meant to make an impact. Our life is meant to influence. And how every single one of us, we all have a different voice. And so, yeah, I just want to leave you with some encouraging words. I just want to read Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. This is from our Bible reading plan that we're reading today in Ephesians chapter 2. Just want to read it. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand. I'm going to read that one more time. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand. And man, as we just read that this morning, this verse just really stuck out to me. And I think it's just funny that we're talking about finding our own voice in relationship to chapter 2, because I just love that phrase that we are God's workmanship. We are his workmanship. And for some of you guys, when you guys hear the word workmanship, you guys might be thinking of like your 7th grade woodworks class project, or maybe something that you're working on right now during quarantine time. But the Greek word for workmanship is poemia, and that's where we get our English word poem, right? So we are God's poems. We are his creative masterpieces. We are living, unique, authentic, different poems that each and every one of us, that's what we are. And as a result, I think our life is meant to speak. Our life is meant to influence. Our life is meant to make an impact, as we've just been sharing all night. And, it reminds me of Genesis 1, where we see, whenever God speaks, that there's power in God's voice. Because as soon as God says, let there be light, we see light happening, right? As soon as God says, let there be the heavens, we see the separation between the water and the sky. And I think whenever God speaks, there's life. And in the same way, our life is meant to speak. Our life is meant to bring hope, joy, peace, love to the people around us. Our life is meant to influence our workplaces, our family, our schools. And I think that's why it's so important that we find our unique voice, because God created us each so differently. That we're not meant to be just like another person, but we're meant to step into the uniqueness of who God created us to be, because there's something that your life carries and releases that only your life has the authority to carry and release. Like there's only certain things in my life that carries and releases that my life is meant to carry and release. And so we need all of our authentic voices. We all need to find our voice to express the fullness of God's creativity, of the fullness of who he is. And so I just want to encourage you. We just kind of shared our process of finding our voice and stepping into who we're meant to be. And I pray that as God, as the author of your life, that he would show you the authentic ways that he created you, so that you would have authority, that your life would have authority wherever you're at. And so I just want to say a quick prayer for you guys, and then we'll have some follow-up at the end, but let me just pray for us. God, we thank you that you are the author and the perfecter of our faith. And God, because you are the author, you give us permission to be authentic in the unique way that you each designed every one of us. Because as Ephesians 2 says, God, that we are your workmanship, that we are your poemia, that we are your poems. And that, God, we're not just meant to be like someone else, but there's something unique to the way you've designed our life, that it's going to carry and release something that only our life can carry. And so I pray for everyone tuning in right now, or who will watch this later. God, I just pray that you would speak to them, reveal to them the uniqueness, the authenticity, the diversity of each and every one of our voices. So we love you, we honor you, and in your powerful name we pray. Amen.
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 Thanks, Josh, for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Any final remarks from the other guys?
Announcements?
Oh, yeah. Announcements. That's good. What are some announcements?
Yeah, so we still have Bible reading, 8:30 a.m., going through Ephesians and Philippians. So even tomorrow as well, 8:30 a.m., we're going to be on chapter 3. We have, IG lives coming up just throughout the week. Just be on the lookout for the schedule. And then also, we're gonna do another announcement just regarding this, but we're actually gonna have prophetic rooms just for people to join in and receive a word from our team. We'll have more details on how to sign up by Monday latest, so be on the lookout for that. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, so Bible reading, Instagram Live, all our IG Live content, prophecy room coming up. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, share with people if this encouraged you. Pass it along, share it, spread the word. And it's been a real honor for us to be able to serve people in this time and just taking advantage of what's available to us and making the most of it. And I feel like we hit a sweet spot in a way.
Yeah.
As a ministry.
Yeah.
We're never gathering in person again.
Hallelujah.
Quote us on that.
Hallelujah.
During the pandemic, guys, I didn't finish the quote. All right, we want to honor social distancing, but thank you, everyone. Much love. Share the word, spread it around, and we'll see you on Instagram, and then we'll see you here next week as well. Peace, everyone.
Peace, y'all.
Yeah.
Much love.